Hi, welcome to Let's Talk Real Estate. I'm your host, Charlie Flannery, and my guest today, very special guest, is Charlie Flannery. I wanted to have a one-on-one conversation with you today, and what I'm going to be talking about is the cost of renting an apartment in this area, in our city of Taunton. To give you a little bit of history, the last time that the real estate market tanked in 1990, it was a solid 10 years before things started to just gain momentum. And, you know, we crashed in 2006, and so we're 5 years into that process. We probably have another 5 years to go. But while many of you out there that own homes, you've seen your values plummet by 40% in some cases. Many of you have mortgages where you're totally underwater. And yet, at the same time, if you want to consider becoming a tenant, now we flash back in time. Around 1998 to 2000, the average rent in the city of Taunton was about $650, $700 for a two-bedroom, maybe $550 for a one-bedroom, and anywhere between $800 to $900 for a three-bedroom. Then what happened was, there's this thing called Section 8, and believe me, I am totally in favor of people that need help receiving some type of help. However, what the state did was they took a corridor south from Boston, and that included Taunton. So consequently, what happened was people that were advertising, say, a three-bedroom for rent for maybe $850, all of a sudden that was worth $1,500 because we were under the Boston guidelines. So you had people that had been taking in maybe $2,200, $2,400 a month on a two-family, which back then was probably going for $175 to $225. All of a sudden, they're taking in $4,500 a month for three-bedroom units. The prices on those multifamilies shot through the roof. That same three-family that you could have picked up for $175,000 to $200,000 suddenly became worth $425,000, $450,000, $470,000 because the rents were artificially inflated. I just went on the website today, and as I said, the City of Taunton comes under the Boston guidelines. So they had Boston, Worcester, and Springfield. I'll give a shout out to all my friends in Springfield and Worcester and Boston. But if you look at this chart, in Boston, they're allowing almost $1,350 for a two-bedroom. In Worcester, they're allowing $986. Springfield, only $888. Now, I'm not as familiar with Springfield as I am with Worcester. I'll take steps to correct that in the future. But as you can see, there's a huge disparity. And coincidentally, that $986 for Worcester, that's just a tad more than the rents in Taunton had been for a well, it's even more than a two-bedroom had been back 10 years ago. So in order to qualify, you have to have certain income guidelines. But then what happens is the state reimburses you for 70% of the rent. Okay? That's why they can say that it's $13.50 for a 2-bedroom in Taunton. Now, how many of you folks out there are struggling with your mortgage? You're underwater. Wouldn't it be great if the government sent you a check for 70% of your mortgage payment every month? I think that would take a lot of the stress off. Now, number one, I mention that because it's a huge diversion of resources from trying to solve the housing home ownership crisis with all those underwater mortgages, and at the same time putting huge inflationary pressure on rents. I was looking through the local paper, and one of the things that struck me was there was a place I was very familiar with. In fact, they don't really deal with Section 8, but they had 1-bedrooms, $775. 10 years ago, or 11 years ago, that was $550. All right? And this isn't even something that's subsidized. It's because the rents have been artificially inflated. So what do we do about it? Well, we're going to end up talking more about that in the second half, but I still want to cover a few other things. Here's a 2-bedroom. First floor, no utilities, no smoking, no pets. $850 a month. Now, the value on that property has fallen from 4.25 down to probably 185 to 200. Why are they getting the kind of rents that they used to get for a 3-bedroom? I'm not trying to, as I say, attack the program of Section 8 itself. I just think that our beloved leaders need to rethink how much they're willing to pay for an apartment in this area. Some may say there were people that bought at the peak and they're carrying a huge mortgage, so they need that high income from the rents just to stay afloat. Well, there were also many people who bought single-family homes, and they went in with some of those adjustable crazy loans, and now their mortgage payment has doubled. So when you have a finite amount of resources to deal with, how do you address the housing situation in general? What can be done about it? This all seems to go on just underneath the radar. If you're an investor or a broker or an agent, you're very aware of this. Many times we'll stress the fact that it's taking in X amount of dollars as revenue to justify a price. But I just closed on a property that for $190,000. That's what the guy paid for it 10 years ago. He sold it for $190,000, and it was bringing in $2,800 a month in rent. Okay. Now, back 10 years ago when that property was selling for $190,000, three-bedroom apartments, it was probably bringing in about $2,400 a month. So it's still $400 to the good. So I just don't fathom it. I'm not that bright of a guy. If someone has an answer, you can always check me an email. Let's talk real estate at verizon.net. And I would really love to hear your input. I'm going to be trying something. I'll just throw this out there for your consideration. If you'd like to be a guest on Let's Talk Real Estate, again, send me an email to Let's Talk Real Estate at verizon.net. In the subject line, put Be a Guest. Give me your contact information and what your background is, and maybe we could get you on here as a guest. I'm open to hear as many opinions as I can from folks from all walks of life. And I also want to go on record as saying that I have invited virtually every politician locally, who's affiliated locally, to come on the show, just to talk. And I sit here alone today, the only one at World Headquarters willing to pick up the torch and talk about what's really going on. We're going to be taking a short break for a couple of public service announcements. Please stay tuned for more of Let's Talk Real Estate. Thank you.
Some things require experts at every stage.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Others are more just a matter of taste and preference.
Just the way I like them.
Buying a home falls somewhere in between. That's why you should visit HomeLoanLearningCenter.com for expert guidance. A website where you can learn just how you should go about buying a home. You'll get facts, tools, and impartial advice. From seeing a lender to settlement and beyond, there's a step-by-step explanation of the process. All at HomeLoanLearningCenter.com.
Houston, we have a solution.
Think of it as mission control for buying a home. That's HomeLoanLearningCenter.com.
This is a message from HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Can you afford your home loan? Could your mortgage payment increase in a few months to something you can't afford? Hi, I'm Ruby D. If you're not sure you can continue to make your mortgage payments, call a government-approved housing counselor in your community for free and confidential help. Keep your home. Know your loan. Call today.
Call 877-HUD-1515. That's 877-HUD-1515 or go to HUD.gov.
Hi, welcome back to Let's Talk Real Estate. I'm still your host, Charlie Flannery, and my special guest is still Charlie Flannery. Thanks for hanging in there. During the break, I was looking through the Taunton Gazette for the past week, talking about properties being in foreclosure. There's one entire page, a second entire page, a third entire page, a fourth entire page. Couldn't hit 5. So what does that tell us? Many of these mortgages were taken out 2004, 2005, 2006, and then when they hit the reset button and the rates went up, the people could no longer afford it. That's why we're seeing the wave of foreclosures. But it's like they're draining them out bit by bit by bit instead of letting the swamp just clear out. I don't understand. I know in some instances it's taken 700 to 800 days from the time a person stops making their mortgage payment till the time they're out on the street. And then in many cases, the bank will finally come up to them and say, here's 10 grand, move. So we all understand the pain that's out there, but they're taking their sweet time, which gets me back to this diversion of resources to the rental market. I mean, if we're going to let it bleed, let's let it bleed. At least at some faster point in time, it would come to a head and start to heal up. This fiddling and diddling and crazy regulations does nothing. It creates not one additional unit of housing. I don't know the exact figure for new housing permits that have been pulled, but I know it's got to be down in the basement. I certainly know if I were a developer, I certainly wouldn't want to be buying a piece of land and now I'm 2 years out by the time I go through all the hurdles of the approval process. I'm 2 years out from even buying my first nail. I'd be very uncertain in this current market to buy a nail. Never mind trying to guess what's going to be the situation in 2 more years. So the market is very fear-driven. But, you know, we see a lot of people coming out of college today. They're straddled with debt many times. They're just starting out in their careers. They're not making all that money, that much money. And yet they go to find an apartment and they're asked to pay $1,500 or, you know, $1,200 maybe for a 2-bedroom. It's not right. It's just not right. I mean, even if the state were to amend their guidelines down to something that would correlate with the Worcester payments, which are in the $900 range for a 2-bedroom, even something like that would be a huge step forward toward affordability. And I'm sure, as God made green apples, that $900 and something that they're paying out in Worcester is putting inflationary pressure on the rental units out there. Those should probably be back to around $700 for a 2-bedroom. So, this, like I say, this all goes underneath the radar. Nobody wants to talk about it, you know? And, you know, now the housing authority is coming in. They're talking about spending $71 million to build 160 new units of housing. My friends, that works out to something around $435,000 per unit. Now, it's like the old shell game. It's almost a Ponzi scheme. The reason that they can spend that kind of taxpayer money is because they can think, I could be making that $1,500 to $1,800 a month in rent for these low-income tenants. So they're getting in on the party. You know, I've been an observer of politics and the real estate market for a long, long time. The politicians will never accept their role in messing things up, whether it's from changing the rules in the middle of the game or overzealous regulation. We need to be a nation that's free of these encumbrances. Otherwise, we're never going to make it. And I'm not talking about raping and pillaging. And it's a bipartisan thing. The market that crashed in 1990, that was a direct result of President Ronald Reagan's willingness to compromise with the members of Congress to obtain some tax breaks. And what they did as part of what's laughingly called the Tax Reform Act of 1986 was they put real estate into an entirely new and separate category of investments. So when this legislation was taking effect, it was going to take effect on January 1st, 1987. Now, what this legislation in effect did was, unless your only occupation was as a real estate investor, you were limited up to something like, I don't know, $25,000, $30,000 that you could offset against your other income. Now, prior to this, you had a lot of successful people, attorneys, doctors, that would buy 50 or 100 units in a condo development because they could take a depreciation on the entire amount and offset the $400,000 that they made practicing law or dentistry or whatever they did. Now, there was a rash of people out to sell. You know, every time I lose sight of the fact that I'm just a kid from the brickyard in Taunton, I get myself in trouble. So I got to keep myself humble, remember where I came from. And there was such a momentum to the market that even though these guys that were a lot smarter than me were selling everything. I mean, we were doing closings at midnight. We were doing closings on a Sunday. And if it didn't close by the end of that 1986, the deal was off. And like I said, there was so much momentum in the marketplace because of guys like me that forgot where they came from, that the market continued on merrily for another 3 years. Then it tanked. And Congress held hearings, and they had guys that were the heads of mortgage companies and banks, and they said it was their fault that they had pictures by Picasso hanging on the wall, or they threw some wild party over in Tahiti. That's baloney. One thing I found is the politicians will never, ever, ever say, we messed up. We shouldn't have changed the rules in the middle of the game. Now you fast forward to this mess that we're in now. Everybody in Washington and everybody in real estate had huge reason to go rah, 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 pump the money out, give it to just about anybody that could cast some fog on a mirror. Everybody was rooting for that. Well, we know how that turned out. And once again, not to say that there wasn't any malfeasance or any corruption going on among the big banks, because we all know that there was. But again, Congress, everybody points the fingers at these guys that must have been taking exotic trips or they had a private jet. If you guys hadn't changed the rules of the game, nobody, it would have continued on. So I don't know. Most of these guys that are up there, many of them are attorneys, and they're pretty sharp guys, but when it comes to negotiating a deal, I wouldn't send them in to buy a used car for me. You know? They put together these packages that are insane, and we're all supposed to stand up and applaud because they put together this harebrained scheme. It don't make sense to me, but I'm just a kid from the brickyard. What do I know? So again, maybe I should say, oh, these guys are a lot smarter than me. But many people get hurt. Many people get hurt. Lives were torn apart and shattered during the turn down in the 90s. I'm seeing it happen now. We sometimes forget about the human cost involved. You know, the families that get torn apart. You know, you got a young couple or an older couple. You know, when things are getting tough, you know, I'm sick of the fact you forget to put away the chocolate milk when you drink out of the container. And, you know, I'm sick of the fact that I'm always having to remove nylons before I can shave. These are the little things that trickle down. That's trickle-down economics, folks. Trickle-down economics is when the people at the top are giving it to us, and we don't realize why we're so ticked off, and we hate the people around us. So what do? I don't know. I'm open to suggestion. I don't think I see any bright spots on the horizon as far as like a solution coming from either the Democrats or Republicans in Congress. I don't hear any well thought out stuff. I mean, we can't obviously slash everything, and yet at the same time, we can't keep paying for things, and nobody wants to talk about it. I'm throwing it out there because I'm willing to talk about it. And if there's somebody that would like to come on the show and, inform this kid from the brickyard down by the river, please send an email to Let's Talk Real Estate at Verizon.net. Put "be a guest" in the subject. Tell me a little bit about yourself, what you'd like to talk about. I'm perfectly willing to hear somebody come on and tell me I don't have a clue. See, I've learned enough in my life to realize that it's okay sometimes to say, I really don't know. That was a major breakthrough for me. I don't have to know everything. I can depend on other people. That's why God made attorneys. That's why God made accountants. But at the same time, I've got to keep my wits about me, realize that not everybody up there in Washington or up in Boston is my friend. There are many things going on that don't always work out to the average working guy's favor. So, for those of you who haven't fallen asleep yet, I want to just thank you for staying with me today. This was my first ever attempt at doing a solo shot. And obviously my budget was slashed, so we couldn't afford to hire another guest. But I'd really like to thank you so much for listening to my rant today. And again, if you'd like a copy of today's show, please send an email to Let's Talk Real Estate at Verizon.net. Please include your name, address, and phone number so that we can verify, because these things are expensive. And the first 100 respondents only. I'd like to thank you once again for tuning in to Let's Talk Real Estate with Charlie Flannery. Be safe. Thank you.